people must go on about it an awful lot because, you know...
Because already that I'm still alive, I'm one amongst the few that are still alive.
In the shadowy world of art, music, and fashion, a haunting figure emerged. A woman of ethereal beauty and enigmatic allure. Her voice a chilling, otherworldly instrument. Her life, a tragic tale of glamour, addiction, and redemption. This is the story of Nico. Watch until the end if you want to know all the untold truths of Nico. Christa Päffgen, known by her stage name Nico, was a German singer, songwriter, actress, and model. Specifically, Wilhelm and Margarete Päffgen were Nico's mother and father. Nico was named after her parents. This family had a strong commitment to the Catholic heritage. On the other hand, her mother was a devout follower of the Protestant Church and came from a relatively humble home. Born Christa Päffgen in Cologne, Germany in 1938, Nico's life was marked by early tragedy. Her father was a casualty of World War II, leaving her and her mother to navigate the shattered landscape of post-war Berlin. Nico, her mother, and her grandfather relocated to the peaceful surroundings of the Spreewald forest outside of Berlin when she was only 2 years old. They did this in order to seek refuge from the destruction that was caused by World War II. They left behind the chaos that was caused by the bombardments that were taking place in Cologne at the time. At the beginning of the war, Nico's father was a member of the Wehrmacht, who had been conscripted to that organization. Although his destiny is buried in mystery, one idea suggests that he was killed by his commanding officer in 1942, after receiving a grievous wound at the hands of a French fighter pilot. This theory is based on the fact that his fate is shrouded in mystery. There is another account of the events that suggests that he had major head injuries, which led to him being institutionalized for the remainder of his life. There are more stories that have not been confirmed to be true, such as the notion that he passed away as a result of shell shock, or that he passed away in a concentration camp respectively. The year 1946 was the year that Nico and her mother established their residence in the central business area of Berlin. At that time, her mother was working as a seamstress in the United States. Following the completion of his education up until the age of 13, Nico began working as a lingerie salesperson at the upmarket department store Shadowy. While working there, he also landed modeling gigs in Berlin. Due to the fact that she had light skin and stunning features, Nico rose to fame rather soon when she was a young fashion model. The height was 5 feet 10 inches, and she stood tall. When she had reached the age of 15, and was working as a temporary worker in the United States, Nico submitted a sexual assault complaint against an American sergeant after she testified, which led to the sergeant being sent to a court-martial. Nico's testimony was the catalyst for the allegations. The occurrence, which is addressed in her song Secret Side, is a matter of dispute among biographers, such as Richard Witts, due to the fact that there is no public documentation documenting it that has been preserved. Nico's remarkable modeling career began when she was discovered by photographer Herbert Tobias at the age of 16, while she was participating in a fashion show for Shadowy in Berlin. This event marked the beginning of Nico's career as a model. Nikos Papatakis, a director whom Tobias admired, served as the source of inspiration for the name Nico, which he bestowed upon her. She made the decision to embrace the name for the rest of her life. She uprooted her life and relocated to Paris, where she got work with a variety of fashion magazines like Vogue, Tempo, and Elle periodicals. She was able to find a job through her relocation. It was at this time period that she made the choice to alter her black hair to blonde, and she claims that Ernest Hemingway was the person who inspired her to make this decision. In spite of the fact that she was engaged by Coco Chanel to perform promotional work when she was just 17 years old, she ultimately took the decision to quit her position and move to New York City. She was able to become fluent in 3 languages as a consequence of her multiple journeys. These languages were French, Spanish, and English. She was able to obtain fluency in all 3 languages. Nico made an appearance in the final film directed by Mario Lanza, which was named for the first time, in the year 1959. He played a speaking role in the film, although it was not necessarily credited to him. When she was working on the set of La Dolce Vita in the same year, she began to attract the attention of the famed filmmaker Federico Fellini. Fellini watched her perform. The end effect of this was that she was finally placed in a supporting part in the film itself, portraying the character of herself. In that particular moment in time, she had relocated to New York and was now enrolled in the acting class taught by Lee Strasberg. While she was attending the same school as Marilyn Monroe, she was also a student at the same time. After having a cameo appearance in the film A Man Named Rocker, which was released in 1961 and starred Jean-Paul Belmondo, Nico was featured on the cover of Moonbeams, which was released by jazz pianist Bill Evans in 1962. Moonbeams was released in 1962. The year 1962 saw the release of Moonbeams, By spending her time between New York and Paris, she was able to acquire the major role in the stripteaser that was directed by Jacques Poitrenaud in 1963. This was accomplished through the process of performing in the stripteaser. Besides that, she was the one who was in charge of recording the title theme, which was created by Serge Gainsbourg. She was also the one who was in charge of the recording. This song was not made available to the general public until the year 2001, when it was included on the compilation album that was titled Les Cinémas de Serge Gainsbourg. Not until then was it made available to the public. It was in New York that Nico became acquainted with the Greek director Nico Papatakis, whose name she had chosen to use as her stage name while she was performing. Nico Papatakis was Nico Papatakis. Nico Papatakis was the same person as before. It was during the years 1959 and 1961 that the two people lived together in the same house. After hearing her singing voice, Papatakis was not only fascinated by her singing ability, but he also encouraged her to pursue musical pursuits. He was impressed by her singing talent. In addition to that, he made the necessary preparations for her to start her singing lessons for the very first time. In 1965, Nico had the good fortune to meet Brian Jones, the guitarist for the Rolling Stones, by chance. Jones was a member of the band. As a consequence of this interaction, Nico was eventually put in contact with Andrew Loog Oldham, who is the manager of the Stones. Because of this link, she was able to release her first record for his immediate label, which was a single with the title I'm Not Sayin', which was a song written by Gordon Lightfoot for the A-side, and The Last Mile, which was produced by Jimmy Page for the B-side. Both of these songs were written by Gordon Lightfoot. Gordon Lightfoot is responsible for the composition of both of these songs. The actor Ben Carruthers was the one who made it possible for her to meet Bob Dylan in Paris during that summer. It was him who was responsible for making the deal. By 1967, Nico had previously recorded Dylan's song I'll Keep It With Mine for her debut album, which was named Chelsea Girl. The album was released in 1967. This album was released in 1967. Dylan expressed his adoration for Nico with the song Visions of Joanna, which was included on the album Blonde on Blonde. This song was Dylan's method of expressing his feelings about Nico. After some time had passed, he presented her to Andy Warhol, who subsequently used her in experimental films that he and Paul Morrissey had developed in New York. Warhol's films included her. Following that, Warhol would cast her in a number of more experimental films. Some of the films that were included in this collection were Imitation of Christ, Chelsea Girls, The Closet, and Sunset. Other films that were included in this collection include Sunset. It would appear that Nico communicated her wish to sing to Andy Warhol, who then proceeded to introduce her to the Velvet Underground, who were among his most recent creative protégés. This is the telling of the narrative that has been passed down from generation to generation. The band was first hesitant to comply with Warhol's desire to incorporate Nico as a chanteuse in the band's recording. The reason for this was that they were struggling with issues in both their personal lives and their musical careers. Nevertheless, in the end, they reached a consensus to carry out the action that was agreed upon. Along with dance, lighting, film, and music, they were the major focus point of Warhol's multimedia event, which also contained other elements such as film and music. The title of the performance was The Inevitability of the Explosion of Plastic, and it was a performance. Originally released in 1967, The Velvet Underground and Nico was the band's first album to be released to the public. Lead vocals were provided by Nico for 3 of the songs that were included on the album. There were 2 songs that were in question: I'll Be Your Mirror, which is also referred to as Femme Fatale, and All Tomorrow's Parties. As an additional contribution, Nico provided backup vocals for the song Sunday Morning for the sake of recording. During the time that Nico was a member of the Velvet Underground, he was confronted with a lot of difficulties, many of which were related to his personal life, as well as his musical experience. In reference to Nico's painstaking preparations in the dressing room, and his pre-performance ritual of lighting candles, John Cale, who is a multi-instrumentalist for the band, made a statement. This statement was made by Cake in response to that procedure. The fact that this method occasionally resulted in gigs being delayed was something that Lou Reed, the band's lyricist, felt to be a source of annoyance. Due to the fact that Nico was partially deaf, she periodically went off key, which resulted in other members of the band making fun of her whenever she did so. The fact that she was unable to hear everything was the cause of this unfortunate circumstance. As a result of her engaging nature, there were worries that she may take control of the band. Additionally, there were confrontations between Reed and Cale, which Warhol found to be amusing to see. Her decision to leave the band was eventually brought about by the tensions that she was facing at the time. They both contributed to the creation of the record, which ultimately turned out to be a classic, despite the challenges that they had while working on it together. It was eventually rated 13th on the list of the 500 finest albums of all time, according to Rolling Stone's list of the best albums of all time. This was despite the fact that it was initially welcomed with a level of reception that was considered to be average. Nico began her career as a solo performer after having previously been a part of the Velvet Underground ensemble. Her career began with her solo performances. She was a frequent performer at the Dome in New York City, where she collaborated with a wide range of guitarists, including members of the Velvet Underground, Tim Hardin, Tim Buckley and Ramblin' Jack Elliott, amongst others. When she was there, she performed with a variety of guitarists. As an additional contribution, she played a significant role in the creation of a number of musical pieces. However, she did spend the most of her time with Jackson Browne, who was 16 years old at the time, and she lived with him for a considerable amount of time throughout the duration of their connection. When they were together, she was in a relationship with him. In 1967, she recorded a few of the young songwriter's early compositions. These songs were recorded by her. Her first studio album, which was titled Chelsea Girl, had contributions from a wide range of artists, some of which were Bob Dylan, Tim Hardin, and Jackson Browne, amongst others. We Had a Wonderful Time. Then there was a song that was featured on the album that was contributed to by Lou Reed, John Cale, and Sterling Morrison, all of whom were members of the Velvet Underground in their own capacities. Nico's involvement in the creative process resulted in the creation of all of the tracks, including one of them. Nico's dissatisfaction with the album stemmed from the fact that it had arrangements of strings and flutes, which is a sound that is characteristic of chamber folk music. The CD was produced by Tom Wilson, who is also the producer of the album. In accordance with her statement, "The first time I heard the album, I cried, and it was all because of the flute. The record had an excessive amount of flutes, which gave her the idea that her creative vision was restricted. This was especially true because of the recording. During the time that Nico was living in California, she had the opportunity to meet Jim Morrison, who was a member of the band The Doors. She is inspired to compose her own songs by Jim Morrison, who also encourages her to do so and acts as a source of inspiration for her. Nico was the one in charge of the creation process when the Marble Index was first made available to the public in the year 1968. With regard to the record, he was the one who was responsible for writing both the lyrics and the music. The sound of Nico's harmonium became her characteristic sound as a result of the fact that John Cale's arrangements included a wide variety of modern and traditional instruments. This was because John Cale's compositions used a wide range of instruments, which contributed to the overall effect. This was a change from her earlier work since it featured a sound that blended elements of classical music, as well as European folk music. This was a significant departure. During the time that Nico was actively working on the record, he went through a full and comprehensive transformation in his looks. He created a visual precedent for the gothic rock subculture that was thriving at the time as a consequence of his change from having red hair to wearing clothes that were mostly black. This was a significant turning point in the history of the subculture. Nico had a cameo appearance in the promotional video for the movie Evening of Light, which also included Iggy Pop, who is a member of the Stooges. Nico made a return-to-live performance in the early 1970s by playing the harmonium and giving concerts in Amsterdam and London. Her return-to-live performance was highly successful. Ever since then, she has been doing performances. Additionally, she and John Cale were the musicians that served as the opening acts for Pink Floyd whenever they played at events of this nature. When Nico, Cale, and Lou Reed finally got together, it was at the Bataclan in Paris in 1972. This was the only time they ever met. Only at this one point in time have they ever come into contact with one another. Nico recorded 2 additional solo albums throughout this decade: Desert Shore in 1970, and The End in 1974. Both albums were published by Nico. During this decade, both of these records were made available to the public. Both of these CDs have all of her musical works, as well as her singing and playing of the harmonium. Additionally, both of these CDs feature her vocals. Cale was the producer of both albums, and he was also the musician who performed the majority of the other instruments. Moreover, Cale was the one who was responsible for creating both albums. Phil Manzanera was in charge of playing the guitar throughout the creation of The End, while Brian Eno, who is affiliated with Roxy Music, gave his experience in synthesizers. Nico's performance of The Doors' The End at the Rainbow Theatre in London in the latter part of that year served as the impetus for the production of The End in the future. As a result of this performance, the production of The End was pushed forward in anticipation. Nico worked closely with the French director Philippe Garrel during the decade of the 1970s, appearing in around 7 of his films and supplying music to 6 of them when he was working with him. Their working together produced useful results. Both of these endeavors were carried out throughout the period of the decade that was being discussed. After beginning her relationship with Garel in 1969, she soon climbed to prominence in both his personal and professional circles, becoming an important player in both of these spheres. Nico made her debut as an actress in the film La cicatrice intérieure, which was directed by Garel and released in 1972. This was the first time that Nico appeared in a film. In addition to that, she was involved in the composition of the film's soundtrack. Their ongoing collaboration resulted in the production of a number of films, including Anna Thor, which was released in 1972, and On Ange Pass, which was developed in 1975. Both of these films are instances of films that were made. Nico's relationship with Garel included an appearance in 2 of the silent films that he directed, the most notable of which were Les Hautes Solitudes 1974 and Le Berceau de Cristal 1976. This partnership comprised the supply of music, as well as a presence in both films involving the 2 individuals. Furthermore, she was a performer at the event that took place in 1974 in Reims Cathedral, which was happening at the same time as Tangerine Dream was giving a performance. During this period of time, Nico had a close acquaintance with Lutz Ulbricht, a musician from Berlin who was the guitarist for Ashar Temple. Lutz Ulbricht was named after Nico. Not only did Ulbricht accompany her on the guitar for a number of her concerts, but he also played the guitar for members of the crowd. As a result of this, her relationship with Island Records deteriorated, which ultimately resulted in her being removed off their roster in 1975. Canet Rock 78 was an event that took place in Spain in September of 1978, and Nico was one of the musicians that took part in the event. Additional performers such as Blondie, Kevin Ayers and Ultravox were among those who played at the event. Her vocal contributions to the album Vuelo Químico, which was produced by Neuronium, were obtained during her involvement in a recording session that took place in Barcelona. She took part in the activity by reciting sections from Edgar Allan Poe's work Ilium, which she had authored. During the time when Patti Smith was going to replace the harmonium that she had stolen in Paris, Nico embarked on a brief tour as a supporting act for Susie and the Banshees who were performing. Both of these occurrences took place in their respective order. 1979 was the year that Nico made her comeback to New York, and as a way to commemorate her arrival, she performed a concert at CBGB's, with John Cale and Lutz Ulbricht serving as her musical accompaniment. The program was met with reviews that were both favorable and negative, and these evaluations were received alike. Together with Jim Tisdall, she started doing regular performances at a number of different venues, one of which being the Squat Theater, amongst other places. Immediately following that, they embarked on a tour that brought them to 12 different cities in the eastern Midwestern region, each of which was completely sold out. Cheetah Chrome, who was a guitarist, would periodically meet up with them at their different locations and accompany them on their journey. The subsequent album that Nico released, titled Drama of Exile, was produced by Philippe Quilicini and was released in the year 1981. For the purpose of creating the album, Nico worked in conjunction with the French photographer Antoine Guy-Camon. There were cover versions of songs like I'm Waiting for the Man by the Velvet Underground and Heroes by David Bowie that were included on the album, which included a combination of rock and Middle Eastern orchestration. Wise was working for Factory Records at the time. Additionally, it was at this period that she began performing with a wide range of backing bands, some of which were Blue Orchids, the Bedlamites, and the Faction, amongst others. She introduced the film Cedar in Vegas, which Philippe Quilicini had made, to the public in 1981. It was Philippe Quilicini who was in charge of directing the movie. After that, she collaborated with Martin Hannett and the Invisible Girls to produce the single Procession, which contained a reworked version of the Velvet Underground song All Tomorrow's Parties. This single was released in the year that followed. In the year 1982, while Nico was on tour with the post-punk band Blue Orchids, he had a big impact on the gothic rock trend that was just beginning to become established. The fact that she not only collaborated with the Sisters of Mercy but also performed with Bauhaus is something that should be brought to your attention. Additionally, they were present at the Futurama event, which was also the occasion when she made an appearance. Along with The Damned and Dead or Alive, there were additional people present during the event. Immediately following that, she began working with James Young, a musical arranger in his band, The Faction, where she gained vital experience in the workplace. There were live compilations that were made, such as 1982 Tour Diary, and In Person in Europe. These compilations comprised recordings of her performances and they were issued. These collections were dispersed over the entirety of Europe during their distribution. During the year 1985, Nico released his final solo album, which was titled Camera Obscura. John Cale was the producer of this album. The record was released at the same time when Nico was on tour. The album featured contributions from a number of musicians, including Graham Didds, James Young, and The Faction, among others. The final track on the album was a modified version of Koenig, which was also included on the CD, which also contained her interpretation of My Funny Valentine. The album was also made available to the public. Located in Brixton, the music video for the song My Heart Is Empty was shot in the establishment known as The Fridge. Since the location was open to the whole public, it was selected as the location. In addition, she continues to go on long tours, during which she performs with either The Faction or the Bedlamites in a number of countries all over the world, including Japan, Australia, and Europe, amongst others. Later performances of hers, such as Heroin, Nico in Tokyo, and Behind the Iron Curtain, were the ones that were captured on recording and made accessible to the wider public. This category also includes her later performances throughout her career. It was during the month of March in the year 1988, when Nico and Young worked together with guitarist Henry Olsen to write new tunes. In the United States of America, this type of partnership occurred. Undoubtedly, the performer Young Kaldoam in Egyptian music served as a source of motivation for each and every individual. The new material was presented for the very first time during a festival in Berlin, where they also played a traditional rendition of Nico's song You Forget to Answer from the very end of the performance. The festival was held in Berlin. The final studio recording that Nico made was a duet with Mark Arman titled Your Kisses Burn following Nico's demise. This duet was included on Arman's album titled The Stars We Are by Arman. After Nico's demise, the record was not released to the public. Another piece of music that was made available to the general public was a recording of her performance in Berlin in 1988. The recording was named Nico's Last Concert, Fata Morgana. Immediately upon her passing, this recording was made available to the general public. Furthermore, Nico gave birth to her son, Christian Aaron Ballon, who is also known as Ari, on August 11, 1962. Ari is also referred to as Christian Aaron Ballon. Ari was given his father's name as a way to pay tribute to him. The French actor Alain Delon was supposed to be his biological father, however. Delon has on many times questioned paternity, which has not been verified. His paternity has not been established. There is no evidence to support the position of a biological father. Evidence that Nico did not fulfill her motherly obligations was presented by the fact that she allegedly used LSD when she was pregnant, and that she led a nomadic lifestyle while dragging her child about with her. Other evidence included the fact that she did not take care of her child. Andy Warhol's factory in New York City was where Ari spent his childhood after moving there from Ohio. In that location, he was presented with the opportunity to engage in drug use, as well as adult environments that he had never encountered previously. When he was 4 years old, he made the mistake of mistaking sweets for prescription medication and subsequently consuming the drug. Alain Delon's parents finally accepted responsibility for his development since Nico was unable to fulfill Ari's standards. This was the case because Nico was unable to meet Ari's needs. She took the choice to terminate a pregnancy that she was carrying in London in 1965, at the time when she was having a brief relationship with Brian Jones. She was pregnant at the time. Nico had a difficult time overcoming his heroin addiction, which he had been struggling with for more than 15 years. He detailed her problematic conduct and discussed the manner in which she dealt with her addiction in the book Songs They Never Play on the Radio, which was written by James Young, a member of her band from the 1980s. Songs They Never Play on the Radio was published in the middle of the 1980s. Additionally, Ari, her son, developed a heroin addiction when he ran away from his adoptive parents when he was 17 years old in order to live with Nico. Nico was the one who introduced him to heroin. The development of a heroin addiction was a direct result of this encounter. While also working as an actor and photographer under the name Ari Parker on an infrequent basis, Ari struggled with addiction and psychological problems after Nico's passing. He also worked under the name Ari Parker. Additionally, he produced work under the name Ari Parker. He wrote a book that he titled Love Never Forgets, which was about the relationship that he had with his mother during the years 2001 and 2002. The book was called Love Never Forgets. This book was first published in French under the title La Mort n'oublie jamais. He had reached the age of 60 when he passed away unexpectedly in Paris in the year 2023 as a result of an overdose that was brought on by the consumption of drugs. During her later years, Nico resided in Greater Manchester, most specifically in the Prestwich and Salford sections of the neighborhood. In spite of the fact that she had a hard time kicking her addiction, she was able to reignite her enthusiasm for making music. During the 1980s, she resided in Brixton, London, where she shared a flat with punk poet John Cooper Clarke. This was a brief period of time during which she lived in Brixton. Alongside that, she was a resident of London throughout this time period. In contrast, they did not have a romantic relationship with one another in any way. Before she sadly passed away, Nico made a last-ditch effort to overcome her addiction. Sadly, she did not succeed. She came to the conclusion that she would take part in methadone replacement therapy and began a regimen that included the usage of a bicycle for the purpose of physical exercise, as well as the consumption of meals that were rich in nutrients. Nico was on vacation in Ibiza with her son Ari when she was involved in the tragic accident that ultimately led to her death. The event took place on July 17, 1988. The tragic event was a terrible accident that ultimately resulted in her departure from this world. A head injury was received by her as a result of a fall that occurred while she was riding her bicycle. In spite of the fact that she was discovered unconscious by a taxi driver who was passing by in the vicinity, it was nearly impossible for her to obtain quick medical attention. The fact that she was found by the taxi driver did not change the fact that she was found. She was originally misdiagnosed with heat exposure due to the fact that the weather was unusually hot. Nevertheless, it was subsequently confirmed that she was suffering from a massive brain hemorrhage, which finally led to her mortality at 2000 hours. According to her son, who recalled the events that had occurred on that day after some time had gone, she had left on her bicycle in the early afternoon, never to return. She had never been seen again. He went into great detail regarding the manner in which she had gone. At the period in question, she had reached the age of 49 years. Nico's cremated remains were laid to rest at a woodland cemetery in Berlin known as Grunwald. This cemetery was selected as the venue for the burial of Nico's remains. In the past, her mother had been the one to reside in this particular spot. A recording of the song Mutterling, which was taken from her album Desert Shore, was played by her friends during the service that was held for her interment. The song was selected from the album Desert Shore. As we conclude our exploration into the life of Nico, we reflect on the enduring influence of this remarkable artist. From her haunting vocals to her profound contributions to the avant-garde music scene, Nico's legacy continues to inspire generations of artists and fans alike. Nico's legacy is complex and enduring. She was a muse, a mother, a musician, and a tragic figure. Her music continues to resonate, a haunting reminder of a life lived intensely. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more musical icons just like this. See you next time.